All right.
Sounds like that's about it.
Yeah,
It's silence, so I guess we'll move on. This is episode 34, and we're talking about why popular financial advice often departs from economic models, free speech on Twitter, and some lightning round questions at the end. Dave Ramsey, Robert Kiyosaki, and Susan Orman have been giving financial advice for decades and have helped many Americans make good financial decisions. However, James Choi with Yale University and the National Bureau of Economic Research found that advice from such figures often departs from the principles of economic theory. Does this mean that advice given by popular financial figures is bad advice?
No, I don't think so. So just looking at somebody like Dave Ramsey, I think they're geared towards people who need the kind of advice that they give. So I like to kind of think about it like this. People like Dave Ramsey are kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous. Most people are not alcoholics and don't need most of the advice, but there's some pretty basic stuff that everybody should also follow. Like you probably should, if you're going to drink in moderation. You probably shouldn't, get wasted at a bar and go hog wild, that kind of stuff. And it's the same thing with Dave Ramsey. A lot of the very basic advice, I think, is just in general good for everybody. Have an emergency fund, spend less than you make, all that kind of stuff is really just solid advice. That being said, there's been a lot of debate over the years about, like debt snowball versus debt avalanche. Technically, debt avalanche is the better financial decision to make. But people like Dave Ramsey also get that people are not always rational. They're emotional about it, and eliminating a debt one at a time might lead you to be more likely to continue than making the right financial decision, which would be, to pay off the highest interest rate debt first, even if it takes the longest. So I think it's just different advice for different kinds of people. People who are very emotional, who need to, have their hand held through it, and honestly, who've made horrible financial decisions, people like that, Dave Ramsey is great for them. If you're already good with money and you're not, a super emotional person, you're not making terrible financial decisions, you probably aren't going to get much of any value out of Dave Ramsey.
I agree with you, Alex. I guess I've never thought about it as Dave Ramsey being like Alcoholics Anonymous, but just because people don't follow the principles of economic theory doesn't mean it's bad advice. It just means that it's not the preferred advice that people want to follow. If you go to 3 doctors, and I guess I'll play off of your analogy, Alex. If you go to 3 doctors and 2 tell you to stop drinking, and 1 tells you it's okay to have a couple of glasses of wine every night, you're going to go with that 3rd doctor's advice, even if the first 2 were the best. There's certainly a difference between the right advice and the advice that people are going to follow. And that's why we have a whole field dedicated to it called the field of behavioral economics and behavioral finance. The whole premise there is people aren't robots. Our behavior isn't driven by data. It's driven by emotion. It's driven by the environment. It's driven by familiarity, availability, recency, and patterns, and a whole other slew of heuristics and cognitive biases. Every time we're presented with a decision, we experience some degree of cognitive dissonance or mental discomfort. Since we humans don't like discomfort, we try to make it go away as soon as possible. And to speed up this process, we utilize heuristics or mental shortcuts to cut through the complexity and arrive at a decision that's good enough. This is no different with popular finance versus the principles of economic theory. The reason why people don't follow the principles of economic theory is that it's too complex. They've never heard of it. It doesn't make sense. It's not available. They have nothing to associate with it. So they make a snap call and they go for the decision that's easier. Given the choice between exploiting the smart beta of your portfolio or optimizing your portfolio for the best Sortino ratio, I think it's more palatable for people just to save 15% of their paycheck, pay off debt, and invest in stocks and bonds. To summarize this all up, I think you just follow the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid, and that'll get you about 90% of the way there.
To quote Dave Ramsey from the paper is that he's often argued against on his talk show about, well, Dave, doesn't it make more sense to pay off the interest rate credit cards with the highest interest rate, but have larger balances than it is to pay off the smaller balances with lower interest rates? Doesn't the math, prove that to be true? And Dave will respond, well, if you were good at math, you wouldn't have credit card problems. And I think that's the gist of why Dave Ramsey is so popular, is because he cuts right to the chase. Is that there are philosophers who sit around and they gaze at their navels and they ponder huge Napoleonic thoughts, and then there are people who actually go out and do things. And I think in popular culture, we like to see people who are succeeding by doing, not people who are succeeding by theorizing. I remember, Drew, when you were in Scouts, we had a motto in our Scout troop. It was, where theory ends and reality begins. Theory ends when you graduate from college, and reality begins is when you have to go out and find a job, and you actually have to start putting 15% of that paycheck away. I think that Dave Ramsey and Suze Orman and Robert Kiyosaki, they have broken the code on talking human to humans. Whereas many of these economists, they still haven't learned how to speak human language yet. So I've often advised you all is that the first 2 years in this industry, you need to read lots and lots of books about financial theory. And then for the rest of your careers, you need to read books on people. Because if you really want to see financial success, you need to understand how people think instead of just how money is supposed to work.
James Choi answered his own question in this paper when he said, any strictly increasing differentiable utility function is locally linear. So agents with such utility functions should be risk neutral with respect to small risks.
Duh.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. I gotta feed the chickens, stir my compost pile, and put the kids to bed. When Dave Ramsey says quit whining and save 15% of your income, that's way, and he makes me laugh when I do it. Then that's way easier for me to follow than spend my Saturday unpacking with. I guess that wasn't James Choi. I guess it was some other study done by a guy named Raven, last name Raven, in 2000. But still, I mean, yeah, the same point that you guys had. But I think that pretty much summed it up for me when I was reading this article. Is that nobody has time to unpack the jargon in there. And they just want Dave Ramsey to be like, tell them exactly what to do, and then they do it. And it's not because people are dumb. It's just because they don't have much time. Like, even really smart people don't want to sit there on a Saturday and, Google what, expectant utility functions are, and then go down a rabbit hole trying to figure out what they do. And all they want to do is figure out how to allocate their portfolio. So time is their greatest asset. And when Dave Ramsey can sum it up in one sentence, that's good enough for most people. All right, so we'll move on to the first ever Devil's Advocate round, where we designate one person to support a view that opposes everybody else, whether they agree with that position or not. Today, the Devil's Advocate is going to be Alex, and we're going to talk about Elon Musk and Twitter. So Elon Musk is giving serious thought to starting his own social media platform because he believes that Twitter is stifling free speech. However, others argue that free speech is to protect citizens from the government, and social media platforms should be able to operate their company in any manner that they choose. Do you agree with Elon or not?
So I'm the devil's advocate this time, and I am going to take a look at this from two different standpoints. One is the legality of what Twitter may or may not be doing. And then the second part is whether or not, regardless of whether it's legal, whether or not it's good for major social media outlets to be censoring certain positions. To keep it very simple, let's start with the legality of it. There are several ways that companies like social media companies are regulated by law in the United States. And two of those are you're either a publisher or you're a platform. To make a long story short, a publisher is somebody that either curates certain opinions that it wants to promote, or it just puts out its own opinions. A platform says, come one, come all, everybody can say whatever they want on my stage, except you can't, call for the assassination of the president or rile up a murderous mob or something like that. Currently, the legislation that governs that is 47 U.S. Code Section 230. You've probably heard of Section 230 over the last few years. And this more or less gives legal liability protection of platforms, including internet platforms like social media companies, as long as they engage in little more than good faith moderation. Get rid of that illegal stuff, obvious things like pornography, that kind of stuff. That's cool. But as long as more or less you're just letting everybody say whatever they want, you have no real risk of being, held criminally or civilly liable for something that somebody uses your platform to say to somebody else. What the social media companies are trying to do, however, in particular, at least according to people like Elon Musk and others, is to ban specific political opinions or economic opinions or whatever that they disagree with, while trying to call this good faith moderation. And people like Elon Musk, Donald Trump, they've been complaining about this for a long time. So to me, it seems like the big tech companies are trying to have their cake and eat it too. They want to be platforms, legally speaking, but behave like publishers who are either promoting or removing opinions that they don't like to generate public opinion in the way that they want it. It's ultimately something that the courts are probably going to have to deal with. Whenever that is, I don't know. The next aspect of this, sorry, this is going on a little longer, but I know everyone's going to gang up on me. So the next thing is whether or not society is actually better if somebody like Elon Musk creates his own social media platform. And the obvious answer you would think would be yes, but it's a little more complicated than that, I think anyways. Let's say you have, Facebook, Twitter, and maybe Reddit. Handful of really big social media companies that are supposed to be now where most of the public discourse is taking place. The public has largely decided that these are the places they want to have public discourse, and these places are supposed to be acting like platforms according to the regulations that they claim when they go to court, etc. But when they're acting like publishers and silencing opinions they don't like, it's forcing people like Donald Trump, who started, I think it was Getter, whatever it's called. Elon Musk wants to start its own. There's an entire industry of right-wing friendly social media apps that absolutely no one except neo-Nazis use. And everyone else still tries to use Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, maybe a few other places. Way I look at this is, while, you can say, yeah, they can all go start their own companies, but this does a few things. Number one, it just does nothing but create echo chambers. It isolates different opinions from each other. There's never any public discourse. Increasingly, polarization takes over. So it's probably not a good idea if everybody just kind of segregates themselves and agrees with one another and self-radicalizes. It's better when ideas with simple regulation can say, can have at it with one another. And, unless somebody's saying, well, I'm going to kill you because I think you're stupid, just let them have at it. To provide an example, let's say, like, since we have Facebook, Twitter, and a handful of other big social media companies, we already know they're engaging in this stuff. Now imagine like Walmart, Amazon, Target, Costco, Kroger, Whole Foods, H-E-B, Aldi, and Publix, and a handful of other big grocery chains all decided that they didn't want to do business with black people anymore, period. And they were just not going to let black people in. Well, black people can start their own grocery stores. There's nothing stopping them legally. But most people in society tend to think that we'd be a lot worse off if that were the case. All of a sudden, you're going to just bring back discrimination. And regardless of whether or not, that would be true freedom, most people don't really like the idea. And I don't see this as being that different. So I think ultimately society is better off if ideas in places the general public has decided is the public square are exchanged in the public square, rather than end up being forced into tiny little echo chambers where no one will ever interact with each other. Have at it.
Well, I agree with Elon, and I disagree with Alex, and I think he's the devil. I think if you want to stand in the middle of the National Mall in Washington, D.C. and express your thoughts peacefully, you have every right to do it without someone trying to shut you down. But if you go to someone's house and offend them, then they have the right to kick you out. You know, as you say, Dad, in my Walter Mitty fantasy, Twitter would allow all free speech, whether that's, you know, the full spectrum, innocuous to discrimination to what have you. But at the end of the day, it's their company to run however they want. If you don't like how they're playing in their sandbox, find another sandbox, or in Elon's case, start your own. I think that's the preferred solution. To Alex's point, where if you have discrimination, it could be bad. But I'm generally an optimist. I think people will naturally be good. If you allow discrimination, if you said Walmart can't have Black people or white people or whatever race, I think enough people would boycott that and disagree to the point where Walmart would not be economically viable. They'd be forced to adapt to the market. If you just let people have free will and don't infringe on their rights, I think you'll have the best outcomes.
It seems like when it comes to totalitarian government input into the economy, I think most Americans prefer 50% totalitarianism, where we put our thumbs on the backs of large institutions who are the provider of the good or service, and yet we give all sorts of freedoms and liberties to the consumers of those things. And what I mean by that is that we always try to put all sorts of rules and regulations on stores and hotels and restaurants, but we don't put any expectations on the people who eat in those restaurants or go to those stores. So in Alex's analogy, he says, what if we had stores that were discriminating against Black people, and we can say, well, okay, then why don't we force all Black people to use your store? Well, you can't do that. Well, why are you going to force stores to open their doors to everybody? It's like the consumer can do whatever they want, but the provider can't. I think that's a ridiculous environment. I prefer 100% totalitarianism or 100% libertarianism. This thing where we only impact and regulate one of them makes absolutely no sense for me. Now, I don't really prefer 100% totalitarianism, except in a philosophical, theoretical way. I prefer libertarianism, where both buyers and sellers of things in the marketplace privately decide what they're going to do without third-party intervention. But in the case of Twitter or Facebook, I don't do either anymore, because as a consumer, they ticked me off when they started jumping into my private conversations on social media with my friends and inputting their own opinions. And I said, it's kind of like AT&T when we had party lines and the operator hopping into the conversation saying, hey, that what you just said was untrue. I go, who are you? Get off the phone. This is between me and this other person. All you are is the line. That's all I ask from you. Once Facebook and Twitter and these other places started jumping into the conversation, I jumped off the call completely. I agree with Drew, is that I think Elon Musk or Donald Trump can do whatever they want. They probably will never get the same networking effect as the major social media companies have already established, because they're not doing anything different. They're doing exactly the same thing, with, to Alex's point, of just becoming echo chambers for the people who are currently getting silenced on the other places. In my world, it's like, if you don't like Facebook, get off of it. If you don't like Twitter, get off of it. And if you need social media to talk to your kids, then force them to come over to the alternative social media site that you're on. But don't be pushed around by the big tech.
This is why we do the devil's advocate round, because not only was I agree basically with everything Drew and Joe said, and you guys pretty much exhausted all my points. So I don't have a whole lot to add. I would say that if Elon Musk did start his own social media platform, I bet it would be a bigger success than people might think it would be. But then there's also, you also have Reddit too. Which is, to my knowledge, I'm not on there a lot, but to my knowledge, is not censored as much as as Twitter or Facebook would be. So you have options out there. What's that?
Way more than it used to be.
Yeah, but I guess ultimately though, the consumer has choices on what they do. Is that they can choose Twitter, they can choose Facebook, they can choose TikTok. there's lots of platforms. There's Discus or something like that. I'm not horribly familiar with. And there's a bunch of different platforms on there, and consumers can choose which one they use. They can't choose, well, I guess they can choose who's in power in their government, but ultimately there's only one government. If you don't like the government, you have to leave the country, which has a lot of consequences for you. So I would agree with Drew and Joe. I think companies should be able to run their companies how they want without the government stepping in to do it. And I also agree that people are if they're doing really wacky things, people will leave. It's like if you don't like if you refuse to make a cake for somebody and people find out about it, that's your decision. And if people find out that they don't like your decision, then you're probably going to go out of business. But I think they should be able to make those decisions for themselves.
I'd like to, if there's no other rebuttals, I would just like to bring attention to the fact that my dad said he doesn't believe in a 100% totalitarian regime, yet he wants to force his children to come over to his house.
Richard! Oh, wow!
So, all right, so we'll move on to the lightning round of our show. In an effort to reduce staff needs, Domino's Pizza, the pizza company, is offering a $3 coupon if you pick up your own order from the store. Do you think this is enough incentive for people to actually go get their pizza instead of have it brought to them?
I think it'll help, at least to some extent. I don't really order fast food pizza all that often. When I do, I usually pick it up anyways. I think when you combine the $3 off coupon for picking up a pizza, plus you don't have to pay a delivery fee, plus you don't have to tip the driver, all of a sudden, 2 pizzas get a lot cheaper for your family. So I think that will have some impact. Large orders, probably very minimal.
I think it's certainly moving in the direction to incentivize people to get their own pizza. I don't know if it's there yet. Me personally, I don't know if I'd pay $3 or save $3 just to go pick it up myself. What I'm worried what it might do is anchor the person buying the pizza to the $3 discount and then not tipping the delivery driver as much, because if your order was $30, now it's $27, we might be anchored to that 27 and say, hey, you get an extra $3 for driving out here. So it could have some negative consequences as well.
I think that our population is diverse, and I think for some people the $3 will act like an incentive, and for other people it won't. I know people who frivolously throw money in the street because they can't see the value in it, and other people is that they can squeeze a penny until tears come out of it. So I think for some folks it will work as an incentive, and for others, I think it's just a sign of the times is that we can't find people willing to make $25 an hour in tips to drive and deliver pizzas because it's beneath them. I think it speaks more to our culture than it does to this particular economic benefit or loss as a result of this $3 discount.
So your opinion is it might work and it might not?
Yeah.
Spoken like
I think it'll do both. It won't might. It will act as an incentive for some, and it will not for others.
So the deal with the coupon is that you get a $3 off on your next pizza, and it's not that you get like $3 off your pizza. They have to give you a coupon, which you have to redeem when you order it. And I think for a lot of people, I don't think they're there. I don't think it's enough incentive for people to drastically change their behavior. I think they'll still have to have delivery drivers, or they'll just have to have a shortage of it. But I don't think it's enough. All right. Earlier this week, Kim Jong-un released a very cinematic video of himself launching a very big missile. What do you think Kim Jong Un is trying to accomplish with this video? And we'll actually throw the video up here just so people can watch it. And Alex, why don't you tell us what you think is going on here?
So number one, if you're a weird person like me and occasionally watch like all these weird propaganda videos that different governments from around the world put out, you'll see this is really just the next one in a long chain. Like if you've seen like the Russian Armed Forces recruiting commercials or like the Chinese military's propaganda videos, this is very much in line with those. So welcome to 21st century propaganda. Number two, the other thing he's trying to accomplish is show that this is North Korea is a great power in a new era. It's a nuclear power, and they have consistently, and will continue to do so, use nuclear power politics to try and force their way to the table in world affairs. And so I think that's just a reminder for both the domestic population and the global population that North Korea is a nuclear power, and they want to have a say in what goes on in the world.
I think most likely what he was trying to do was kind of save face or shed himself in a better light after his first missile failure. I think on March 16th, he launched the first intercontinental ballistics missile, and it blew up, and it actually caused structural damage and a few casualties in Pyongyang. So I think he was just trying to save face. But also, I think he might have been trying to show off his watch. As I think I've mentioned before, I'm a watch fan. He's wearing an IWC Schaffhausen. It's a pretty nice watch, and he flashed it like 6 times in that video.
I think when you're a despot, that many of the advisors who give you advice that you don't like, they end up with their heads separated from their shoulders. That over time, you'll find that whatever you actually see in terms of propaganda is what the despot personally wanted. And I doubt that Kim Jong-un is really trying to communicate so much to the world as he's trying to communicate to the North Koreans. The people in his own regime is that, look at me, I am the supreme ruler, and if I deem it necessary, I'll push this button. So what is he trying to accomplish? He's trying to win over even more support, because I have access to the nuclear power of North Korea.
Everything you said is true. However, the collateral from this video is that he is torturing Americans, because when I found out that this was not a skit from SNL, which I originally thought was funny because it was so bad it was funny, and then I realized it was actually real, like they were actually doing this, I cringed so hard I think I strained my eyelid. So he's torturing Americans is what he's doing.
It looks like something when you give a junior high kid a camera and they make like a home video. I don't know par with that.
It looked like satire. Yeah, it looked like something the Babylon Bee or the Onion came up with. All right. All right, I can't believe we're talking about this, but on Sunday, Will Smith allegedly slapped Chris Rock for making a joke about his wife's hair.
Richard! Oh, wow!
Some have speculated that this was staged. What do you think?
So number one, I don't really care either way, but it's whether it was real or not, it seemed to get the Academy Awards a lot of attention. Viewership skyrocketed in the immediate aftermath of it. But more in general, security didn't intervene. Chris Rock didn't seem all that upset about it. The police didn't seem to do anything, even though they were there. There are rumors, taken for whatever they're worth, that backstage staff and security was told there was going to be some kind of altercation between the two, and it was part of the show. So I probably lean towards no, it wasn't real. Either way, it certainly did its job, though. It got attention on the Academy Awards.
I agree. It certainly got attention. I mean, there's baby orphanages being blown up in Kiev, and we're more focused on who's being slapped at the Academy Awards. I think it was real. From what I've seen, I don't think it was staged. I think the Academy in Hollywood kind of has their foot in their mouth now, because basically they condoned violence. They still gave Will Smith the award after doing that. So kind of spineless in my opinion.
Not really surprised coming out of Hollyweird, but I do not believe it was staged. I think that it was real. I think very few people in my social circles give it much value. It's not like Will Smith and his marriage are sterling examples of what a family should be. But no, I don't think it was staged. I think it was real.
If it was real, I will hand it to Chris Rock for just standing there and not even defending himself. He just took it straight on the face and didn't even put his hands up to to defend himself. I mean, to me, some of the I didn't spend too much time looking at this, but some of the people like breaking down the event, it seems they make a pretty compelling argument that it was staged, and the fact that Chris Rock just stood there and took it was pretty compelling to me. Otherwise, he just must have been so shocked that he didn't think that Will Smith was going to do it, so he just stood there. But I don't know. I still don't know if it was real. Some of the fallout I've been kind of following a little bit seems to make it think it was real, but I don't know. I'm gonna go with fake.
I think since he got in one little fight and his mom got scared, she should send him to his auntie and uncle in Bel Air.
Yeah.
Pretty much already there, down the road.
You're good. All right. Well, that's it for episode 34. We'll see you next week.